What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I'm very excited today because we have Chris DuBois, who is an expert agency coach. He's helped agencies really grow and scale. And I'm really happy to have him here because before that, he was actually a CEO of an agency. So we get to talk about all sorts of things about growing agencies, what he finds within agencies that are the most challenging. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's going to be a lot of fun. First and foremost, as I do with every guest, I want you to start with a little humble brag. Tell everybody what you've been able to do for clients. Tell everybody what you've been able to do for your own agency when you were the CEO of the agency. In other words, why should people listen to you?
Yeah. So, man, I don't often like to brag. The agency side was a lot of fun. We made the Inc. 5000, 2 Comma Club award, like all the fun stuff that comes along with just growing a business. With that, I'd become CEO after like 3 years of working with the agency with my clients. And we're finding ways to reduce the amount of time they have to work while still maintaining profit just by switching how they're looking at their offerings. And we've got a couple clients right now that are just killing it with it. So yeah, that's I guess what I got for you.
Nice. So, we're going to dive into kind of the whole offering side of things. We're going to talk about that. But I want to first start with the journey on the agency CEO side. You said you became CEO after 3 years of being with the agency. Tell me what happened. Like, where was the agency at when you started? What were you guys offering? What were you guys doing? And then how did you kind of end up being CEO?
Sure. So I should probably go back and start with when I started with the agency. I was at a very just like junior level marketer. I just left the Army as an infantry officer and was like, what am I going to do next? I don't know. And so kind of fell in love with marketing, figuring that stuff out. And so for about 9 months, I just went deep with this agency, learning everything I possibly could. At that 9-month mark, I became the head of operations and ran that for a couple of years of just, all right, agency ops. What do we do? How do we do this better? How do we kind of keep more of the profit from all the stuff that we're doing? And then I stepped up as non-founder CEO and started growing the company like in that seat where the founder stayed on. He kind of slid over to be the head of growth and just focused on kind of the different aspects there. And we took on different roles, more of a revenue generator, profit optimizer. And so he was able to stay in and he kind of kept the sales seat and kept that kind of portion of the business. And I just focused on how do I make the team super efficient at doing this? How can I deliver the best results for our clients so that we're keeping more of, that revenue in our pockets? And through that, we made the Inc. 5000 and did a bunch of other cool things, got a lot of great results for our clients. I think we grew from when I started, we were about 10 team members. At one point, we got up to 25-ish before I separated. And so we had some good growth there, good growth financially. It was a lot of fun in the process, a lot of lessons learned.
Tell me about a little bit of the downs in that journey, because it sounds like everything went really smoothly. I assume that isn't always the case. Tell me a little bit about the challenges that you guys faced growing.
Yeah, so man, there were a lot of challenges, right? Finding the right people. I really refined my hiring process as I started learning different things. I'm very much a character hire first. Like I want to make sure I get the right people in, and I have the idea that if I get the right people, then those people will also be able to do everything else, right? If you have the right team built, doesn't matter if your processes are off a little bit, like they're going to figure it out. They might not be the most efficient, but they're going to get the job done at the end of the day. Some lessons learned where it's like maybe I held on some people a little longer than we probably should have. And that kind of hurt us in the long run. At times we had, we lost clients, like every agency will. Clients will turn over. But when you're banking a lot kind of on some of the bigger clients and then they leave, it leaves a pretty large hole in your revenue. And you start looking like, okay, how do we refill that quickly? And so we started shifting even the thinking around that route. Now we had one client that was massive and they kept acquiring new brands and we kept doing the marketing for those brands. But rather than looking at it as hey, this is revenue coming into the business, we kind of viewed that as a growth fund. And so it's like, hey, this is money coming in. It's awesome. We're not going to bank on it as our primary source of revenue. And just shifting that mindset helped us quite a bit because now we had some kind of fun money to do things within the business, but we weren't going to worry if they left. I was like, yeah, we just lost our fun money, right? There was a challenge in or transition, I guess, for me moving from head of operations to CEO. fortunately, myself and the founder worked together at that point for 3 to 4 years. And so we kind of knew each other and we were able to talk through a lot of it and get to a good place. But it's like when you're shifting your role entirely and someone else who owned the business, it's really hard for them to let go of a lot of things. And so we kind of had to work through like, okay, well, how can we do this in a way that we're both with this change?
So tell me about that change. What was that change? What was that change for you mentally? Like, what was the difference between being the head of operations versus now being the CEO? How did you approach things differently? A lot of times we find that, you kind of have the opportunity to either hire internally and kind of level up somebody, or you hire externally. And for the most part, when you're in that growth mode, when you're really kind of playing the margins and you're paying the cash flow game, it's really, really hard to hire internally because that person has to, learn as they go, right? They have to learn on the job in a sense, and you're paying for that learning experience versus paying a little bit more upfront for somebody, but they already have the systems. They've already got the experience. They can already come in and do the things. So in this case, you were hired kind of and promoted internally. So what was that shift like? How did you treat your role as a CEO versus the head of operations?
Sure. So I got to give credit to the Army for part of this. I was an infantry officer, and one of the things you're always doing is training for that next job. So like when you're a platoon leader, you're looking at what do I need to do to be a good company executive officer? And then when you're there, what do I need to do to be a good company commander? And so you're kind of training for that next role while filling that obligation. And so as the head of operations, the founder and I had already talked, and like we knew at some point I would step up to be the CEO. We just didn't know when. We kind of wanted to make sure the business was in a good place to be able to do it. And so I was already preparing, right? And like training, okay, how do I need to shift things? The biggest shift for me was that we didn't have a big ops team at the time, right? I had 2 people working with me. One of them managed all of our finance, payroll, everything. Someone else was helping me with project management, like doing the ClickUp stuff, looking at team efficiency, making sure our capacities were in check. I was very hands-on in that role and working with clients, even working with all of our team members. And so when I moved up to CEO, it's like now I actually have to pull back a lot more. So I keep that bigger vision of the company, right? Make sure that everything's running smoothly and nothing is completely reliant on me. It's the idea that the more valuable you are to the business, the less valuable your business.
100%.
And so that was kind of that same mentality. The more everyone's relying on me to get things done, like the worse off we are because everyone's relying on me. They can't just function without me. I'm now tied in. If I can't take a vacation, right? I have to be working, answering messages. We had a global team. And so like, there's no actual like, hey, we're out of office hours. It's like, no, I had people in the UK that were up the same time I was up in the morning, but I'm getting my kids ready for school and they're already, knee deep in work.
So as you kind of gone through that shift, what would you recommend somebody who's ultimately the owner of the agency, or certainly, at that stage has been one of the founding members of the agency and is trying to make that shift themselves? What have you learned? The trials and tribulations of that process? What are a couple tips you can give that person?
For the founder, having someone else come in, you have to be willing to let go of things. And one, you should only be putting someone in if you trust that this is the right person for the job.
Right.
Right. And so at that point, now it's on you to be able to let go of some of this. Check in when they need you to, but like you don't necessarily need to do a daily check-in. At some point, they're going to feel like they're being overstepped on everything, especially if you're going to the team and talking these things. And so getting really clear in the expectations and, just what does this position actually do? What are the requirements for this position? In our case, kind of the founder was essentially, right, like the senior board member. Like we didn't have a board, but like that was the role he was filling. So the CEO is still reporting to someone, and he's the guy who is still putting it all on the line as the owner of the agency. And so I would go to him. I'd provide all my reports to him and like talk through these things. But yeah, knowing that I needed the bandwidth to be able to run with stuff. So like if you're giving someone the title of CEO, treat them like a CEO, right? Don't kind of handhold. You're like, if you brought in someone from outside the organization to be a CEO, like you're kind of expecting they have the competencies to be able to just deliver on day one. Like they're going to spend some time kind of figuring things out, right? Getting their feet wet. But like they know what they need to do and they're going to do it. Otherwise you wouldn't have hired them. And so just trusting that you've made the right decision, and then finding the places where you can have those checks and balances to ensure you did, like, over time.
And what about if you're an owner and you're trying to grow and you're trying to transition to that CEO role? I know that wasn't your case per se, but like you said, a lot of owners have a hard time switching that mindset, right? So what's the advice you got there?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges for especially like owning an agency. Most agency owners started it because they had some skill, they had some competency, or an opportunity popped up, and they're like, I can do this. And they did it. They started building up a process, they built up a team around them, right? But just because you're the first one there does not mean you're the most equipped to be the best leader for that team. And so building a team around you that does it, finding a coach, finding mentors, finding accountability groups you can be a part of in order to shift your mindset for how do I move now into from the guy who created this idea, this concept process, and delivered everything, like really had your hands on everything, to someone who's just making sure everyone else has what they need in order to deliver at that same level. That's probably the biggest mental shift that an owner has to make is just.
So let's shift now to what you currently do. So you're now in a stage where you're helping agency owners and you're helping them kind of scale and grow. So what are the things that you tell agency owners? Like, what are the main points that you kind of preach to help them take their agency to the next level?
Yeah, the biggest thing right now is I'm trying to get agencies to move from tactical deliverables to strategic offers. If AI is picking up speed, right? 2 years ago, wasn't on anyone's radar. Now it is. I can write an entire blog post using AI. It's not going to be a great one, right? But I can do these things. And so the idea is that if your agency is just delivering, you're paying me for 4 blog posts a month. We call ourselves an SEO agency, but you're essentially paying me for content, right? Some intern working at one of your clients is going to be able to figure out how to create content using AI and just have those deliverables. So what can you actually provide that's a level up from that, right? Well, one, you have the strategic expertise of understanding the space better than anyone else. You know how to get insights. You understand that Google's changing, right? Like, it doesn't want to just keep seeing the same type of content. It wants information gain. And so we want to get these SME input, like these awesome thoughts, like thought leadership type content into our blog post. So now there's something new going into the world. As an expert, like working at an agency, I understand how to do that in a way that no one working for an individual brand can. And that's because I get to see the problem with every single client I work with. So I get to see it maybe 10 times a month, the same problem, which means I get to iterate on this problem and test things and try things out. Where if I work at a single company and I'm a marketer, I can only if I look at my homepage and I want to test something, I can only run one test to see what's actually working in the space, right? Any other tests are going to interfere with it, so we can't do it. But as an agency, I can say, okay, I'm doing this test on this homepage. I have another client who maybe this test will work better, right? I get to keep trying and learning so much faster. And so what I'm trying to get these agencies to do is take that strategic expertise that they have. Let's take something that your team is great at delivering, package it from a strategic offering, and deliver that. And then, yes, you can add implementation on the back end and deliver those tactical deliverables. You can still offer that, but you're not banking on that because you're making yourself replaceable if that's your primary offer.
So give me an example of a strategic type of offer. What does the packaging look like? What does the pricing look like? How do you pitch it to a client?
Yeah, let's take, I guess we can just keep going with the SEO kind of agency, right? First thing I'm going to do is look at my team, do a full assessment on what are our competencies, like what do we have that we can use as our skills, our abilities that actually make us great at something. We want to be the best in the world at something. And there's a lot of agencies out there, hundreds of thousands, right? You're probably not going to find that thing right away, but you can make a name for yourself and become the best in the world at something. So you look at the team, you figure out what that is, you identify any gaps that you would need in order to deliver. Then we work on the offer. Once we know that, issue with I see with a lot of agencies where they don't necessarily do what they're best at. They just do where they kind of see the money is sitting. Not a great approach. And so for the actual offers, right? So now instead of saying, hey, we're an SEO agency, I'm going to give you 4 blog posts a month for this much money, which you're essentially paying for the hours, right? To go into whatever, producing that asset. we're going to say, hey, we're going to get you this outcome, right? Here's the estimated growth path that we're looking at. Maybe we have a 4.2% growth rate over time. We're going to do whatever we need to in order to get you that result because we understand SEO better than anyone else. So yeah, it might be blog content. It could be link building. It could be just going out and doing some guest posts, getting more traction. Maybe we don't even want to look at Google anymore. We want to go look at YouTube because that's where the audience is. But we're going to be able to do an ICP assessment for you, figure that piece out, come in with our advice on how we should actually handle this, and then deliver it. And so now, rather than saying, hey, I'm going to charge you, $3,000 for 4 blog posts a month, I can say, hey, we're going to charge you $3,000 to do this initial assessment. We're going to sit down with your entire team, ask all the questions, figure everything out. We're going to come back with an entire marketing strategy for you. We'll deliver that, right? And that's step one. Then we can move into a longer term engagement, building on that strategy. And like 3K is lowballing, right? If you're doing a quarterly strategy, yeah, maybe it's 3K. If you're doing SEO, it's going to be a longer term. And so we can say, hey, for 10K, right, I'm going to give you everything that you would need to do over a year in order to be successful. And it's very specific to your brand. As an agency, you get to do this so many times that it becomes, like Mad Lib style, right? Like you have a strategy deck that what types of things you have to plug and play in order to make it work. You're just trying to pull out that information from your clients, get it into this, and then deliver. So now you're providing strategy that they can't get, right? You have this knowledge, but you're not spending 20 hours for that, that 3K paycheck. You're spending a couple hours because you have that knowledge. You understand the space better than anyone else. So you're able to deliver it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we talk to our agencies all the time, Funnelytics, that at the end of the day, the way you should be thinking about it is you should be able to, first and foremost, sell your client on the map that you can put on this canvas, right? So like you said, 4 blog posts would literally be 4 little icons on a canvas. Nobody wants to buy an icon on a canvas. They want to understand how does that then go to the little purchase icon because they want to see money at the end of the day, right? So what does the whole engine look like? What does that whole strategy look like? Visualize it in a way that makes sense to them, right? So that you can go and say, all these pieces are all designed to make you this dollar over here, right? So everything that we do is there. That is phase one. You come up with a strategy, and that's really what you're selling is that expertise, like you're saying. It's that whether you want to position as a fractional CMO, whether you want to position as a blueprint, or you want to position it doesn't really matter, but it's that strategy aspect of things. And then you can go and start thinking about, okay, now let's move on to the build. But what's really cool about this process, and I 100% agree with you, is that the strategy component can live and breathe on its own, right? So that means if the client decides, hey, thank you for the strategy, I'm just going to run with it, you've delivered a lot of value prior to writing any sort of content. But that is what actually positions you as the authority, the expert, the advisor, the person they're going to look at when they're trying to make these core decisions. And that's a big win. How do you think about like recurring revenue? How do you think about packaging recurring revenue? Do you bolt in strategy with it? Do you look at it more as like, these are the deliverables on the recurring revenue side? What does that look like?
Yeah. So ideally, everything you're doing, you should be looking for that recurring revenue, right? Businesses work when recurring revenue outpaces recurring expenses. Simple enough. And so we want to, and the predictability for your business is there. So when we're looking at packaging that, it's really going then into the implementation of that strategy, but ensuring that you have the understanding of what's happening. So like, actually, great way to use Funnelytics, right? I know, okay, so I'm going to keep using SEO agencies. We're on a path here. I can say, I know the strategy for getting this done. Now, for one client, it might be, hey, we need to hit blog content really hard, right? And so I'm going to map out their entire buyer's journey, everything within Funnelytics. I'm going to show all the different blog posts we'll be doing every month, how this works. For another client, it might be, hey, we actually have to do YouTube. And so I can map that out on a separate chart. And now I can plug and play for any of these items. But I can be looking and following this and saying like, okay, the actual metrics are saying this isn't working for us right now, right? Like this path is here. People are falling off during this stage. And so I can use my strategic expertise again, right? Not the necessarily just this tactical, like, what step do I do? It's like, no, I am seeing numbers now and I can make the right decision in order to get us that desired outcome. I can look at these different maps that I've essentially made and said, like, maybe this one's not working, so we actually shift here. Or, hey, we're seeing this type of content's working really well, so let's double down on that. Or maybe we just need to shift to a different topic cluster and get people to this specific page on the site because it seems to be converting better. People are actually engaging with it. So we're doing different things like that. There is no small number that you have to set for a recurring engagement, right? We had clients paying $24K a month for essentially, we're doing some SEO within their growth marketing, and then we're doing CRO on their website. We'd usually built their websites and we're just optimizing. Like bigger clients could be $24K a month. We could also have clients at $9K a month, which was kind of our standard play, which was, hey, we're going to do this blog content because we need to get people to the site in order to be able to test whether the site's actually working and converting. Like if we don't have traffic to it, everything's useless. And so we're going to work that piece, get people in here. But getting people in here didn't always have to be doing blog content. It could be, all right, we're going to help you get your LinkedIn profile built out, and then we'll attract more people that way. Or we're going to help you with this YouTube channel, right? But yeah, I think focusing on the desired outcome and then having those milestones and gates to say, hey, we're working towards this. You can see it on these charts that we're providing you. That's why you're paying us. It's for the strategic expertise. And then calling out those points where you make a decision and it's like, hey, we could either go left or right. We're choosing right because of this. Like, because we know this. They're not going to get that from trying to figure it out themselves. They're not going to get that from plugging the question into ChatGPT, right? They're getting it from coming to you, who has seen this problem again, just over and over.
What are your thoughts around niching down? How do you talk to agencies about, I know so many agencies that have such a hard time niching down. Do you recommend it? Do you push them to niche down? Do you do the opposite and say, you know what, niching down is not that important as long as you niche down on your deliverables? What are your thoughts?
So this might be a bit different than most perspectives. I don't think you niche into an industry or anything. You niche into a problem and you get really clear on this problem that you solve. And simply by being an agency, you see this problem over and over. So you get to now talk about that problem a lot. The next layer of niching is really picking what industry has this problem. And now you're essentially plugging a lens over all of your marketing, right? So you're saying, we're going to look at this problem from manufacturing. So say, hey, we work with HR, right? We're providing some solution for HR sections within companies. That's going to look very different for a manufacturing company versus a tech company. Now, I can still solve this problem for you. I know how to do it. I've seen it before. However, I'm not going to attract everybody because they're talking about the problem differently. And so I'm going to put on this lens on my marketing and say, this is who I'm best for, right? Usually it's someone who you've gotten a great result for and you're doing that. So you're niching into an industry based off that problem. Now, as you start to grow, you can expand same problem, but you expand into other industries and you can say, hey, we're even for your initial clients, right? And in tech, after you've been working in manufacturing for a while, you can say, hey, we've seen this problem so many times here. These are the things that we know work and we're able to do it for you.
The problem is always some form of leads or customers. So what do you mean by niching down, or I say niche, you say niche, for a specific problem? Give me an example of a specific problem.
Sure. So that is often the hardest part with working with my clients on figuring that out. Because right, as agencies, we're all trying to solve the same problem, which is getting you more visible within the market, right? That's essentially marketing. I'm trying to get in, change your beliefs so that you go in and make a sale. So depending on what we're trying to, like your specific problem, there's layers to this, right? Where first you have this core problem. From that, you have a bunch of kind of sub problems that are feeding it or feeding from it. And then you have really the symptoms that the customer is seeing. And most customers aren't super problem aware where they know exactly what it is, right? They're waking up in the morning with some kink in their neck or like their joints hurt and they're just like, I'm getting old. But like, really, no, it's because you ate like 2 pizzas last night, right? Like in a bowl of pasta, right? So they're going to look for whatever that problem is. So depending on what your team's competencies are, is what problem we're going to start looking for and defining that problem. And so it could be like, hey, your problem is that the content that you're producing for search is not optimized, right? Like you're not actually getting it in. So that leads to all of these other problems that you're having. And that's why you're seeing it with these symptoms. And so the problem isn't necessarily going to be the most specific and unique thing for the agency space, but it's going to be something that a lot of agencies right now aren't talking about because they're saying, hey, I can do marketing for B2B tech companies. It's like, okay, that's pretty grandiose. Like there's a lot of companies that fit into that. It's like saying my niche is SaaS. It's like, okay, like there's what type of SaaS company? Like there's so many. And so right now by saying, hey, I solve this specific problem, and then using that lens again, and then talking about the problem over and over, that's what's going to get people attracted to you. Where word of mouth is great. So WordStream did a study, I think for last year, where like 60% of agency clients are coming in from like referrals and other things that the agency doesn't necessarily have control of. Okay, so we want to keep that going. That's a huge part. Only like 14% were actually coming in from distinct like marketing efforts, like doing your website, doing these things, and people finding you through those tools. And so if we know referrals are going to be that big, we need to build up word of mouth. But word of mouth isn't just people talking about you. It's people talking about the problem you solve the same way you talk about it. Because when they start talking about it the same way, they're going to find your content that way because that's what they're searching for. And so we want to really make that problem like the thing that we do, right? That we base all of our marketing around. And so I could talk about getting top rankings on Google different than someone else. And now if I can just make how I'm talking about this problem so clear, concise, something that people feel, but I'm using the language that people come back to, that's what's going to get me found. Chris Walker from Refine Labs, very good at this, right? He'll create a term just out of the air to define whatever his big thing is for the moment that he's seeing. And then the market starts talking about it the same way. And if you find any like revenue R&D, if you start looking for any of those things or start talking about the problem that way, you're going to find Refine Labs, right? And so like it's a great way to talk about that problem and get it kind of branded to you. So now everybody finds you.
Interesting. Yeah. I have a slightly different approach that we go by and we teach people, but it ultimately kind of is the same thing. It's just, again, we use Funnelytics, right? So we use a canvas, and the way I kind of explain it to people is if you really want to scale, your job should be to sell the same Funnelytics map over and over and over again. In other words, if you think of a Funnelytics map, or you think of a map as a system, a funnel, whatever you want to call it, it has all these different pieces, and these pieces are all built towards driving this one goal, which if it's let's say a SaaS company, maybe it's demos. If it's an e-commerce business, maybe it's purchases, or if it's e-learning, whatever, right? It's all driven towards this one goal. Then your job should be to think about, how do I sell that same map? Because it's solving the same problem, which is I need more demos. And your system is a methodology at the end of the day to go and solve that one thing, right? So maybe you do it through a combination of LinkedIn posts and outreach and content for the CEO, and you created a little system that generates leads for SaaS companies through this, kind of going back to what you said. What is the core competency? What is the expertise that you have that another agency may not, right? So another agency may say, hey, we can get you SaaS demos, but we do it through this SEO engine, in a sense, which is completely different, right? At the end of the day. Tell me very quickly, what is your best growth tactic? If you can kind of summarize it in one word. Agencies struggle to grow all the time. Let's not say referrals, because obviously that's not a growth tactic. I'm talking about something that is repeatable, scalable, that you would recommend every agency to do.
So I would say create a self-liquidating offer. Take a piece of the problem that you solve, right? This bigger problem.
Yep.
Break that, grab one of those like critical pieces that you can get someone an immediate result. If they follow this, right, they will take that, turn it into a self-liquidating offer. Charge something low just to get them into your world. By charging them something, they have a little more of a relationship with you. and they're going to consume it. They're more likely to consume whatever you've given them. But then that also pays back for any ad spend, anything else you're doing on this service. And so now it becomes like a cyclical lead gen source for you. So you're not worrying about referrals all the time. You've actually created your own marketing engine in order to do this. But I see very few agencies that have a self-liquidating offer to just know that their clients are coming in without needing to go do all these other things and beg your current clients for referrals and stuff like that.
It's a great tactic for sure, and one that I've used not so much in my agency, but with software for sure. It's the only way that you can just spend $1, you make $1 back, but then you, in the long run, make $3, $4, $5 back, right? So you make $1 back that same day, and that's the best way to kind of scale quickly and predictably, because ads are, turn them on or off. All right, Chris, I mean, this has been a really fascinating conversation. So I think everybody's gotten a ton of value. I sure did. Where can people learn more about you if they want to work with you, if they want to learn more about what you do? Where do they go?
Sure. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Chris DuBois, should be easy to find, or you can go to dynamicagencyos.com. Got everything lined up there for the process, the model, contact, get an email course, do all the fun stuff.
Appreciate your time, Chris. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes as well. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your time, Chris.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.